Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and NBs. Welcome to another episode of Stream of Thought. It's Warui Deshou. We're talking about Vinland Saga, and we may be talking about Vinland Saga at a lower rate of energy this week.
Oh, I've got plenty of fucking energy. I have so much energy right now. Furious anger. But actually, I can't direct it at Vinland Saga, annoyingly enough, at least this time around, because we had a damn fine episode. There's your TLDR review from me, folks. But since we're talking about Vikings and being topical, let me tell you, this week has been fucking Ragnarok for me. Holy shit. And it just keeps getting worse. But I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to bore you with my domestic shit. I'd rather talk about the episode, to be quite honest. For your sake and for mine.
Well, Shadon has had a bad week. Please send him your hugs on Twitter and in Discord. I've been a little bit under the weather. I was out of work yesterday. I called out sick. I can actually breathe today, so we can do the episode. So we're the mind energy, the analysis, and the crunching of the points will be all happening. But like the transmission from like brain to like energy, word stream algorithm, entertainment, like all that, it might get lost from here to there, but we're gonna give it a go as we always do, rain or shine. Right. We're always here for you.
I literally had to rewire my broadband filter box, like my phone socket, to get this stream going, because my decorator, he's a good lad and all that, but he, unfortunately, because of a completely separate catastrophe that happened today that has totaled half of the wiring in my house, he didn't have time to put it back on and rewire it. So here's me frantically Googling, like, how do I plug these tiny wires into this microfilter socket to make it work? And because I'm just that fucking good and that fucking determined, I actually did it. But now I have no hot water or heating in my home. So quid pro quo, I guess. Wasn't going to get off the hook that fucking easily, was I?
Oh. Wow. I mean, well,
this is a drinking stream, by the way. There is vodka in this.
Yeah, that's right. This is not a Diet Coke stream for you, but
no.
This is just goes to show how dedicated you are to our audience out there, and I know that they're very grateful for your diligence, your ingenuity, your craftsmanship. Soldering things together.
My rampant alcoholism.
That too. We always appreciate that here on Warui Deshou.
I should probably mention at the top of the stream, folks, that if you've pieced together half of what we've been discussing so far, things are in a pretty bad shape at my house at the moment, so I actually may have to, at some point during the stream, disappear for a little while if I get a phone call from an engineer who's coming out to fix my boiler. It might not even happen at all. It may potentially happen tomorrow. And, as much as I'd like to spend the next 14 hours talking about Vinland Saga, that probably won't happen. I'm going to apologize ahead of time if that does happen. But I will, of course, leave in the very capable hands of, a friend from across the pond, but always close to my heart, the Soul Doctor.
That's right. That's me. And the other lad is Shadon, who is our master of coin, master of puns, vodka.
Master of disaster.
Yeah. Vodka swiller extraordinaire. And first of all, before we move on from our personal hells to Vinland Saga, by way of transition, I just want to apologize because I said I might not have actually said it on the air, but I did say to Shadon that I'm going to grow my beard and hair until the end.
You are such a bloody traitor.
Until the end of the show. And I just at the weekend I just couldn't take it anymore. It's the longest I've ever had my beard, like in my entire life, and so it was just time. It was just time.
What did you do after you shave with that, did you shave with a knife and then stab you in the back with it, you prick?
Well, it's not like you were going along with it.
Fine.
If you were actually doing it, I might have continued to tough it out. I would have.
I have standards. I have very few standards, but that is one of them. I will tell you that.
Listen, it's my first lie. I'll be punished duly off the air by our punishment Taimu mistress, Vorgalia, the keeper of whips.
You're going to get dark web, mate.
That's right. But, okay, so we're here to do some Viking talk. And before we get to episode 14, we're going to wrap up 13 by revisiting the polls. But before we pull those up, I just want to let you all know who are watching live. If you're watching on Periscope on Twitter, you won't be able to chat with us. We've got our Twitch chat up, and that's the one that we're looking at currently. And, if you leave like tweets on the Periscope, we'll try to look at it. I don't really know how feasible all that will be because I have like a million things up on my monitors. But go to twitch.tv/Warui Deshou if you want to chat along with us. Emily and James from the Discord and James from Anime News Network and Kick the Beckett are in chat at the minute. But it sounds like you got the Twitter machine booted up and ready to roll. So polls from episode 13, go.
Oh boy, the first one. Well, I'm gonna saw the end of this one off because I think it just feels more appropriate to my current situation right now, which is Shadon 1010 cursed? The actual question was the poll me, but let's just actually, cut to the chase here. Let's boil it down to absolutes. And would you know it, people were correct, because 88% said totally, and 12% said no, just unlucky, which in my book might as well be the same thing. Yeah, this is why, I've actually got to do polls today, and I don't know what I'm going to do other than, are you going to send me a voucher for a new boiler? Yes, and how much are going to be the answers. Fucks if I know. Anyway, poll 2. Now, obviously, last time when we covered Vinland Saga, this was like the first new OP that we had, so we thought I'd ask a question about it, which was, since we got a new OP, are visuals or music more important to you? In an OP, that is. And the answer was 29% said visuals and 71% said music. So, and I think, I think that's fair. I mean, having listened to it again, listening for this episode, again, it looks good, but the music is just bleh. Honestly,
boilerplate.
It sounds like commercial filler. I'm surprised, it isn't used to sell game of food or some shit like that. Honestly, I could totally see some gamer kid going nuts on his Xbox controller playing Call of Duty or whatever, but he just runs out of energy, and then that song, whatever it was for the new Vinland Saga OP, and then suddenly he's top of the leaderboard, multi-killing all his way, calling all of his enemies fags over TeamSpeak or whatever. I'm right. I'm right. So, poll number 3. Who is the butt of the joke? The hidden third answer was me because of the way this week's been going, but that's neither here nor there. 27% said Gratianus, Mr. Freebutt himself.
Yes.
But 73% said Asa. There's no wrong answer with that one. But
the butt of the joke? Get it, everyone? The butt of the joke? Is it Acer or Gratianus? The butt of the joke. It's good. It's a good one. I like that poll.
Well, let's leave that poll in the rear view, so to speak, and move on to that. Now, I'm very bitter right now, but I can still, crack an occasionally decent pun. It's my coping mechanism to stop me, from winding a rope together. Anyway, episode 13, poll 4. Do you join us in shipping Thorfinn and Knut? 73% said yes, and 27% said no. So people be shipping, but maybe they mean Viking longboat shipping. Maybe they're building something for him. I'm just saying. And then the next one, which is a follow-on question from that, was Knut or Canfin? Both of which sound to me like some kind of off-brand digestive medicine to me.
I was chided by the Thorfinn Archive Twitter account, and they told me it should have been Canufin and not Canfin, and I regretted. I didn't want to remake the poll to taint it, but I regretted my actions, my words and deeds.
Fair enough. But otherwise, that brings us to the conclusion of the polls. I just want to say, by the way, we had quite a lot of participation.
Oh wait, what were the splits on the?
Oh God, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, this already going off the rails. I haven't even thought about the actual episode yet. 49% said for Knut, 13% said can Finn, and 38% said fucking hate this. Why you do this to us, Warui Deshou? Why you do that? Why you do that?
Oh, too good. It's too good. That's why I must.
But yeah, I want to just thank everyone for taking part in those. We had quite a lot of participation in some of those polls, which is really, really nice to see. And we will indeed hopefully be having more as the episode goes along. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, I can already think of one, which is going to be the big central question you and I will be tackling in the talking points. Because this episode is heady. It's very, very heady.
And heavy.
Heavy, yeah. There's a lot of ideas to explore here. Mm-hmm. And I think that, is it Makoto Yukimura who wrote Vinland Saga?
That's, I believe, correct. Let me.
Yeah, I think he has some strong opinions. In general, let's not lie, but I think he has some strong opinions also on religion specifically, and the guiding hand of God, as it were, quote unquote.
Yeah, the guiding the guiding middle finger of God.
Oh, that too, yeah. Maybe he was more of a Monty Python enthusiast, just where they put the foot down on
right? Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But anyway, more will be coming along later. So thank you everyone who took part. I will now pass the baton over back to Doc so he can start laying out what actually happens in episode 14, The Light of Dawn.
Yeah, well, really quickly first.
That's what I'm waiting for right now, by the way.
Right? Yeah. Well, listen.
Awesome hot water.
You know it's coming because of how dark it is. And we all know it's always darkest before said dawn. But before we get to the summary, just wanted to quickly discuss the director of this episode, Gyoko, The Light of Dawn, is none other than Atsushi Kobayashi.
Can I just interrupt? Do you say that the Japanese translation was Kyoko?
Gyo, Gyoko, Gyoko.
Oh, close. I was just getting really strong Tokyo Godfathers. Oh my God, they're crossing over.
No,
but not quite. By the way, I'm back on this weekend if I have my way with it, provided my house doesn't spontaneously explode on me.
Man, that will not happen. That can't happen. It shan't happen.
Better fucking end.
All right. So Kobayashi. Kobayashi has a pretty big CV for being a person that seems to have been involved in a lot of recent anime, and they've done a lot of different things. You see everything from a credit for motion graphics, preview production, got storyboarding, eye catch production, opening production, CG guest modeling, setting production, storyboards, avant animation, ending movie production, lighting assistant, episode director, and director. Photography, so this all sort of visual elements of a production, it seems, and also telop work, TELOP work, telop work.
So his telephone's OP. He's a really OP telephone operator.
What if that was it? He's just taking calls and they put that on his resume. No, but I think the things that the notable things, and then the things that they've been most involved in. So, did you see the Ancient Magus Bride, Those Awaiting a Star prequel OAV? Did you watch the prequel?
I didn't actually, even though I watched the entire main series.
Okay.
Although I think that I'm not sure if I would necessarily be up for watching the prequel, only because, I sold myself into slavery because of my apocalyptically awful family life. Yeah, that was probably about as much as my poor heart could take, to be quite honest. Just saying.
Yeah. I am with you. But Kobayashi did the storyboard and episode direction for the third episode, and I think final episode of that prequel. An anime that I love to shout out, Kobayashi worked on Gamers.
Rise up!
Gamers TV, photography, and VFX. Again, God, what a varied CV. But it looks like the Girls und Panzer, and Girls und Panzer der Film, which I love that they call it der Film. That's the greatest.
Oh God, I should get my German phrase books to try and respond to that. I only was in Berlin last week, after all.
Yeah. So, yeah, both the TV show and the movie, they've got storyboarding credits, episode direction, and key animation for the TV series. And then, like, again, a lot of the rest of the credits, there's an occasional storyboard episode director credit, like, but it's usually for like one episode of something. And then most of the credits are just these visual, like, motion graphics, for My Hero Academia or the Mob Psycho 102 opening. Or preview, like, you know what I mean? They're associated with a lot of interesting and high-profile projects, but, like, in these roles that we sort of wouldn't consider substantively, like...
Excuse me.
There's a large monster apparently about to eat Shadon, so we have to excuse him. But yeah, these roles that we don't really necessarily consider, like, here's the true creative direction behind a show, but an interesting CV nonetheless, I think, for Kobayashi. So we'll get to our summary now. Let me quickly pull up the stream so I can see what's happening here. And okay, so episode 14, here we go. The Light of Dawn. Before we get to the summary proper, this is the first time I, like, actually read what was in the OP, as in, like, right at the beginning, you have, like, some text in the background, and it's kind of, like, a little bit hard to read, and it's up there for a decent chunk of time, but not super long, considering how long it is, so it could be something that most people just, like, pass over. So I'll go ahead and read that text. It may illuminate some things now or in the future, or it may not. It may just be an interesting sort of whatever. But the text said, like rowing a boat, we enter the future backwards. All we see are the scenes of the past, and no one can see the views of tomorrow. It actually says no one cannot see the views of tomorrow, but, like, I just think that was probably a typo there, a bad English, an oopsie. So I'm gonna go with no one can see the views of tomorrow. All right, so that was in the OP. Keep this in mind going forward. So the episode begins with this conversation at the camp. And the tone of it is a little bit different than what's come before and what will come the rest of the episode. It is more lighthearted, comedic, because these two kind of recurring Viking guys of Askelads, they call themselves, like, brothers in arms. They're having this conversation with the priest because they're still trying to figure out what love is, according to said priest. And, you know, they talk about their own relationship and how they would watch each other's back in battle and on. And the priest says, you know, though, that's not what I'm looking for. It doesn't match my own picture of what love is. And they're like, well, you're just weird. You're weird, man. Like, what are you talking about? And, you know, he says, well, would one of you die for me in the battlefield, or would you trust me with your life? And they were like, well, no, you haven't earned that trust. We haven't been through battles together. There's been no foundation to build upon for me, Viking man, to treat you, priest, the way that I would my brother in arms. And the priest says, well, exactly. That's why what you're talking about is not what I consider love. And this sounds very irrational to these Vikings. And they start talking about Thor's, right? Because they say, well, you want to hear about something weird because you're weird. So we'll talk to you about Thor's. And we all remember what happened. It took a lot of arrows to kill, Papa Thor's. And he died, but he did not kill any of Askeladd's men. And specifically, the priest hones in on this one particular line, this one particular utterance of Thor's, which is, a true warrior has no needs of swords. And this is a sort of mysterious thing that he's told Thorfinn before. And I guess he told Askeladd, or the Vikings heard him say. It's been a long time since we've watched episode 3. But yeah. The priest is like fascinated by this, right? He's just like in awe and wants to hear everything. Hello, Yorzuha boss, aka Dana, aka Blue Sea devotee. How's it going? Shadon is AFK for a few minutes. I heard a really awful sound coming from his house, and so he ran. He took off his headset and ran to go check it out. Where was I? Yes, the priest was fascinated by this idea that Thor's is putting forward, and Thor's himself. He wanted to know more about him, and the Viking in episode 14 break him. Yeah, he's at a point in which he could be broken by something like this. It's true. But no, look, so yes, the priest is very into it, is very into Thor's. We see snow. We see a blizzard. We see, yes, it broke me as well, that suddenly, remember last episode, Emily, you're killing me. Askeladd took a different path than people thought he should take. He made a sort of idiosyncratic choice, tried to take a shortcut, right? And he was trying to beat the snows, but it turns out, well, he didn't do it. There's a blizzard. It's coming down quite hard, and the Vikings have not made their way to the place that they want to be, and so they see a little snowy village, right? And things are going to happen there, which we'll get to in just a minute. But I believe, before that, and actually I think before the opening, we actually see Anne. So I'm telling things out of order, but it doesn't matter. You're getting the gist of it. You all watch the episode. But just to recontextualize, so we see a little girl called Anne praying in front of a tree. And I think actually the first thing we see in the episode, the very first shot, is a black screen with some white text saying, it's either quoting or paraphrasing a Bible verse. It doesn't give the address of the verse. It says, why have you abandoned us? And I believe it's meant that it's a part in the Bible where someone's asking this of God, why are you allowing all these horrible things to happen to our people? Why are you not here? Why aren't you doing anything? Why have you forsaken us, right? And I use that word forsaken, which will probably remind people of the fact that Jesus Christ himself said that as he was dying, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? But anyway, Anne is at this tree praying and thinking. She's thinking like, God's laws, right? Do they say you have to be pure? Do you have to be like 100% sinless, pure to get into heaven? Because I got this pretty dope ring and I love it a lot. And, well, how are you? Is everything okay? Oh, you're muted, sir. You're still muted. Oh no, you're still muted. I can't hear you. Let me make
there
sure.
We go. I had double muted myself because I wanted to be extra sure. Because it wasn't a phone call from the boiler people, as it turns out. It was a phone call from my sister. The nature of which I'm not going to elaborate on, although I will say it's incredibly good news.
Okay.
So
well,
we take those.
That is good. That's great.
Yes, she wasn't unfortunately, attacked by raiding Viking pillagers who just wanted a cheap meal, as it turns out. Also, I have more vodka, so there you go.
Very good. So we're at the part of the summary. I have been talking out of order. I spoke about the scenes early on in the camp between the priest and the Viking dudes, and now I'm doubling back to talk about Anne.
Have you got to the point yet in which Anne has dinner with her family, and then, of course, they are rudely interrupted?
No, not quite there. Still talking about. So we're talking about the part in the very beginning when the first thing we see in the episode is a black screen and some white text that says, why have you abandoned us? And I believe it's like a paraphrase of a part of the Bible. It could be a lot of different things, and talked about how Jesus, on the cross itself, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of parts in the Bible, people lamenting.
I get you, Jesus. When you come back home and you find that your broadband, filter has been turned into a pretzel, and that your boiler is currently as useless as a sandpaper condom, I can understand that entirely. It's exactly my words. I hear you, bro.
Yeah, right. So there's a lot of people in the Bible at different points that call on God. They're like, you've abandoned us. Like, why? Why have you done this? But Anne is again, she's wondering if God really desires someone who's 100% pure, because she is not, because she has stolen a little ring that she went to the market when she didn't have any money just to look at stuff, and she saw a dope ring that she loves, and she took it, and she's been hiding it in a tree.
I believe that she took inspiration from two fishing little folk who found a ring in a river once, and they fought over it. And this is the point, folks, by the way, just to give you a bit of our behind the scenes. I said to Doc in the run-up to this that he needed to do for his Viking voice the voice of Spiegel for this time around. And he was very, very confused because he hadn't seen the episode yet. But now, obviously, Doc's the gears are going in his head, the penny is dropped, and he's just like, oh, that's that pop culture reference. That,
I didn't... I totally, even after watching the episode, I was like, why Spiegel? Because I'm a dense motherfucker. It's like, oh yeah, the ring. Yeah, right. Duh, right?
Well, to be fair, we learn out later in the episode, it does allow Anne to hide from, her attackers, so it technically serves the same function.
Right, yeah, it's true. In a roundabout sort of way, it is an invisibility making device. So yeah, okay, fine. Here's my Viking impression of Anne. I have to drink a water really quick.
One does not do the Spiegel voice lightly.
It is I, Schmiegel. I have my dope black precious that Schmiegel found in the market. Schmiegel's hidden it in a tree, so those wicked, tricksy Danes don't find his precious. They will smash it, but Schmiegel knows. Schmiegel knows all.
Okay.
That is the best Viking voice you've done since we started covering Vinland Saga. Now, I will confess, maybe not on the strictest of terms, but I certainly love the shit out of it, so it'll do for me.
Fair enough. Oh my god. So yes, the ring, and we are treated all throughout the episode when we see Anne, even from these early shots of a contrast between her hands and the ring. We see her hands are very sort of just they bear the marks of hard labor, of a life spent working. Her nails are cut and broken. She's got red palms and knuckles, a lot of kind of lines that indicate
the life of a professional League of Legends player.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, 100%. That's totally. She's gonna join the English team. I think she's right on the cusp of breaking through to the professional ranks, and yeah. So you might be wondering otherwise a ring, what's so special? But you have a girl who's very poor, so she can't afford those kind of things, and you have a girl who she can look at her hands for the first time and see something beautiful, and it's why she was so drawn to it and why she doesn't want to give it up. She knows she's broken God's laws by stealing it, so she believes, and she wants to throw it away, but she can't bring herself to part from it. And after the whole business with the camp and the priest, we see in the snowy village that Askeladd and the Vikings have come to sits a family. We see them saying grace, sitting over a modest meal. This is Anne's family, and one of the little boys asks why God is punishing the world now, and Daddy says, Papa Englishman, he's like, look, he's not doing it now. It was prophesied it was set aside long ago, of 1,000 years after Jesus died and came back. God would judge the world. Okay.
That was again equally impressive, I must say.
So yeah, okay.
When are you doing the dub doc? When can we expect this to handle?
Right. Again, I just am so curious how they're going to do this dub. If they're going to make everyone have European accents. I really,
don't even want to
really
imagine
look
what
forward to it.
No. If Thorkell's to be voiced by anyone, it's got to be Jameson Price, the gentleman who did Ryder in Fate Zero.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That
big booming voice.
Is his Japanese seiyuu the same as the seiyuu who did Ryder? Can you please look that up while we're talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. But yeah, no. So Dad says, look, it's not just this sort of thing that God decided to do out of the blue. It's a prophecy. 1,000 years after Christ came back, the judgment's going to happen, and Jesus knew, of course, that these horrible Danes would show up, and so that's part of why the world is ending.
He was.
It's going to damn them all.
He fucking was.
Yes, I knew it. I fucking knew it. Yeah, baby.
That obviously means we need to have Jameson Price back to do the voice of hell in the English dub.
Oh, he's such a good. I have not heard, admittedly, Jameson Price, but the seiyuu is quite good. But I'll take your word for it on Mr. Price.
Jameson Price also voices Leo Whitefang in Guilty Gear. I've said it before and I'll say it again. He is the Brian Blessed of anime English voice actors. Big booming classical voice.
Gotcha.
He nails that kind of stuff, and he would play Thorkell to a T. So Funimation or whoever gets the dub for this, don't fuck this up.
don't drop the ball.
One job. One job. Don't fuck this up. Pay him many dollars.
Do the thing. Well, amidst all this kind of rudimentary theology, the discussion going on among her family about how, bad people like the Danes are going to go to hell and on and on, Anne says she has to go to the toilet, and she slips out to go to her little spot in the tree in which she's hidden the ring. And again, she puts it on. It's like, oh, this is
that obviously attracts danger, like as it does.
Yeah.
It all fits. It all fits. Every single thing.
That's right. The eye of Sauron is now upon her.
The eye of Askeladd.
Yeah, I know. So she's like scared of the devil. She doesn't want to go to hell. And on, and she wants to get rid of the ring. But again, it's so beautiful. Mount
Doom's a fair bit away.
She can't.
I mean, what's the equivalent of Mount Doom in Vinland Saga? Ben Nevis. That's technically one of the closer peaks that I can think of.
How far away is it from Gainsborough, which is, I think, where they're sort of close to?
Well, they said the kingdom was they were crossing into Mercia, which I looked up, and Mercia is just basically Middle England, or Middle Earth. Sorry.
Oh my God! Please stop.
No, I'm running this joke into the ground. I tell you that for free. Which I'm guessing that what's happened in the intervening time in the episodes is that having travelled across the river to Wales from the south end, they've made it up more towards the north end, probably to Manchester even. Maybe this is the point where they arrive in Manchester and make themselves known. Dicks, don't do that to my hometown, you pricks.
They need to come out as City or United fans. They have to choose. That's the ultimate choice.
Maybe that's just what it is. Maybe that literally is what it's like. Is Askeladd United or City? Maybe that should be a poll. Maybe I'll put that up for fun.
Please put it up. Let's see. Okay, so at this point, like I said, Anne is kind of having her internal struggles. She's such an interesting character. Her kind of what happens with her at the end, especially. Well, she sees the descending host of horrible Viking people, Yorm's Vikings and the Welsh. It's they're coming. They're walking into her family home, and on
I want to intervene because there's something I need to tell you all a little. Because I watched this episode and I saw that Bjorn was sizing everything up, and he was obviously getting ready to make his move. And I don't know why this popped into my head. Maybe I was drunk at the time. Maybe I was just being overly imaginative. But all I could think of was you'll have mentioned the two brothers having a discussion with the priest earlier. All I could imagine was them two carrying Bjorn, to one on each side. So one of them's got one arm, one leg, one has got on the other. So he's just lay flat in the air. And just using it as a battering ram to have his head burst through the side of the hut and just then use it to break it down. I don't know why I thought this.
It's a good visual, though.
I don't know why I thought this. I just imagined beyond you, just bursting through.
It's a really great visual, though. We need a... I hope that was one of those, one-page gag strips that the author did after this chapter, just to help lighten the mood a bit.
I can totally imagine Bjorn being used as a battering ram.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he'll do anything for a mushroom, as we all know. So as the army is as the mercenary band is coming into her home, another sort of biblical allusion paraphrase thing flashes on the screen, the black background with the white text, and this one's up for a little bit longer, and it basically says, thou hast rejected us, thou art very wroth with us, and this is sort of subtly different than the one at the beginning. The one at the beginning, is very much God, we feel like you're kind of not present because there are these hard times and like we're not getting any help from you. And this one, God is wroth with them. Like this is actively like they feel like he's against them. This portion of scripture or whatever that is being paraphrased, because this army is coming who Anne doesn't know anything about like the circumstances that have led the Vikings here. She doesn't know the calculus that had to happen. She doesn't know that they're protecting the prince and that there's this political kind of there's this treaty at stake, like a ceasefire, people's lives hang in the balance in the mission succeeding, and da. She doesn't know about any of that. She's just sort of like praying, and then here comes a bunch of evil motherfuckers, and like they descend, break into the home, they take all the food of everyone in the village, and clearly there's barely enough food for those people to make it through the winter, but there's not enough to feed the army, the mercenary
Bjorn, like, he notes that, oh god, this food's terrible, and thought, well, Bjorn, like, I'm not going to disagree with you offhand, mate, but maybe you should have turned up 2 days ago when they were serving cream of mushroom soup. You'd have probably been happy with that.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah,
that's exactly that. That's why he thinks it's bad. It probably tastes fine, like for food at the time. But he's like, no mushrooms, no deal.
The onion porridge. He does not.
Where's my mushroom stroganoff? Where's my stroganoff? You fuckers!
Come on, Ma. What's up? And I like how she's like afraid at the beginning until Bjorn drops the bowl, and then she's like, now just a damn minute, you. It's a crime to waste food in this economy. And she's just like browbeating him basically, and then
can I just also add, by the way, that as someone who I have many problems with, but I'm not going to elaborate on those right now. When I was like 18, I was like a full foot in height over her, so if ever she yelled at me, it was the most hilariously pathetic thing ever. And that's the impression I got here, as Bjorn is just looking over this poor lady, who has every right to yell at him. And I can just imagine him just being there like...
Well, unfortunately, he backhands her. But
yeah, I should have done that to my own mother, but that's a discussion for a different time.
While this is happening, I should note that the priest tries to warn them, because, hey, they're Christians too.
Take note of that for later. That is very important.
So he says, the Vikings are coming. The Vikings are coming. And, Lars Revere, as it were, gets punched in the gut and beaten up pretty thoroughly. But his efforts notwithstanding, the village is easily subdued. Like I said, they have all the food piled up, and it's not enough for the soldiers even to hole up and make it through the winter. But they need the food. The soldiers are going to take the food, but the villagers, they say, like, we need it too. And one of them, the father of of Anne and her people, says, look, if you just leave us half, we'll make it on half, and you guys can have half the food. It's okay. Just please leave us this. And like Askeladd, who, like, his eyes look like totally empty, like he's just like a being devoid of mercy, and he says to them, it's cool, man. I've thought about you. Don't worry. You won't have to worry about making it through the winter. And of course, initially the man's like, oh, thank you. And he's like, you won't have to worry about making it through this winter or the other winter, because we're going to kill you. We're going to kill all of you. So none of you have to eat. And who was it that raised the objection? I didn't see, but someone said, Askeladd, they're civilians.
I think it might have been Ragnar, because Ragnar definitely does like continue that objection later on by saying, but they're Christians, which again, put pin in that, because that's going to be important in a bit.
Yeah. And, Askeladd says, look, we're doing this for the prince. It's necessary. And what does the prince do? Like, he just looks down. It doesn't really do anything. Doesn't say anything. And the Vikings slaughter the villagers in a pretty harrowing scene, and we see Anne's point of view for this scene. During the part of the snowstorm, all the villagers are kind of huddled together. I don't know if they are groveling or praying or both, but they're kind of bent over on the ground, and the Vikings just plunge their swords into them, and it's like it's a massacre. And blood and torn pieces of cloak and everything are kind of flying into and through the snow.
It's a visual parallel as well to the very first scene from the episode, which is the priest's recollection of a similar event in the past. So you might, without getting too into it, this of course, because it's not really a full-fledged talking point, but remember what we said about cycles?
Yeah, it's happening again, so to speak. And Askeladd, important to note, says that, you know, this is best for the prince. And that's all we really see of that group this episode. I think Thorfinn maybe got like one single shot. He was like looking all grumpy about being out in the cold. Don't really know at all if he was part of this massacre. I would love to hope that he was not, that he was hanging out with Knut.
But then again, one might argue as well that his indifference or his apathy makes him complicit regardless.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
But we can discuss that in a bit.
We will. Because there's obviously an important final scene when, you know, I don't know how long after the massacre this is, but we see Anne wandering through the woods. By the way, she escaped this whole ordeal because she remained in hiding after going to her secret spot. She saw from a distance, she saw everyone get killed. She still got her ring, of course. But she's kind of walking through the woods, and the snow has died down. It's very calm, and she sees the aurora borealis looking up into the sky, and she begins to talk to God, and you know, she's saying, you know, God, you've taken all my family. Are they with you now? Like, I guess hoping that they are. And then she says that she hopes that she doesn't have to go for a while. And she's not like sad. She is excited. She's kind of invigorated by what has happened. She says she feels
grateful even.
She feels elated. This whole event has made her feel akin to when she stole the ring, witnessing this great evil. She says she feels elated that people this evil exist, people that don't care at all about being punished by you, God. And then she falls into the snow, and then we see the sun coming up. It's dawn of a new day, and we see her rising from the snow. A rebirth of sorts, I suppose, has happened. And then that's the end of the episode.
Woo-wee. Woo-wee.
Man. Okay, my friend. I've been talking for a good long time, so I'm going to let you lead us with the talking.
There's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to start with a more broader topic here. And I'm going to talk about my initial reactions to this episode when I watched it only on Sunday, just as it came out. And my initial reaction was thus: what in the flying blue fuck was the point of that? Yeah, I went there. Now, here's the thing, right? There's two ways one can approach this particular episode. The first is as its own individual piece, and the second is as a piece of the larger puzzle of Vinland Saga. Now, I have previously discussed at length on this podcast my grievances about the fact that I feel the show is not spending enough time with Thorfinn or Knut or Askeladd. Thorfinn in particular, I must say. It's especially noticeable, by the way, in this episode because both Thorfinn and Knut. Do you want to know how many lines of voice dialogue they had between them? None. Big fat fuck all. Nothing. They have nothing in here. And so this kind of, my initial reaction was kind of negative because I thought, okay, for all that I appreciate all this episode is doing, I don't care because I want to continue their stories. I'm not interested in the story of like Anne or anyone else. And I also kind of drew parallels between Anne and the lady we met previously, who obviously took Thorfinn in when he was scouting, you know, combed his hair. You remember her? She was similarly Christian as well.
Mm-hmm. So
I thought like we were treading the same beats again. And part of me still holds that feeling that I'm just like, can we get on with it? Can we get on with their story? But there's something about this episode that reminds me of a little thing of perspective. Because we had the previous episode in which we spent a lot of time learning about Askeladd's history. And we kind of felt a certain grain of sympathy for him, did we not? Like, we understood that, you know, he himself had suffered, like, you know, he had
you had to bring up that little talking point. I mean, can't we all just forget about that and move on? I mean, it was so long ago, Shadon.
Oh, dear. Oh, yeah.
No, yeah.
Just...
Look, totally. No, this is, you're totally fair, though. I mean, this is the brutal reality that is the other side of the coin.
Well, this is exactly the point I was about to get to. The reason this episode I find is interesting and I find it really fascinating is because it feels almost like a rebuttal to the very episode or issue in the manga, if you want to take it that way, that we've just witnessed, which is, oh, okay, I've given you backstory and you might feel a kernel of, like, you know, empathy towards Askeladd and in turn Thorfinn from understanding, like, how they've, you know, been warped and twisted and devoured by war and pillaging and plundering and raping and all those awful things. But now we get to see them through the perspective of a different character. This is why they like, Thorfinn and Knut have no dialogue whatsoever, because we see them as Anne sees them. We no longer are in that omniscient viewpoint of, you know, privileged observers that we are when we watch shows and television, anime, you name it in general. We are now viewing them as Anne sees them, as cold, uncaring, callous individuals who, as in the same way that the winter storm that comes over them is completely indifferent and would take their lives if it could, like, they sweep over them in the exact same fashion. So
I don't even know if I would say uncaring. Like, she might even see them as caring deeply about killing them. You know what I mean? Not well, I mean, think about how, like, she's very invested in, like, the cosmic drama of good and evil, of God and the devil. They're very real to her, and here you have this, like, evil, you know, truly evil group of killers, right, descending in. So it's, I feel like she wouldn't think of them as men. Almost, she wouldn't think of them as uncaring or a force of nature. I don't think anything is like, I think this is a supernatural event to her. So I think this is like,
I think that's her interpretation, but we also still get the perspective that we're offered, which is that, well, I'm going to kill you all anyway and take what you want because it's a pastime. That's what Askeladd describes it as.
Oh, yeah. You were just talking about Anne's point of view.
That's true. That's true. But we still see them in some sense as she sees them, which is to say that, you know, they're an outside force. We're no longer placed in the position in which we are suggested to us that we sympathize with them. We were reminded of who they are as, you know, people, that they are pirates, plunderers, murderers, you name it. So here's the thing, right? I'm not going to deny this episode wasn't effective at doing that. I think it was magnificently executed start to finish in terms of how it presented, like, you know, a force that we had previously come to, like, you know, get too acclimated to, get a little too comfortable with, and put them back in the frame as, like, the awful people they are. But I again must ask, in the long-term, you know, roadmap that is Vinland Saga's plot, haven't we done this already? Is this not old ground that we've already tread? Like, we've always known that Askeladd is a bad person. I mean, he murdered Thors. So, you know, and then since then he's only gone and done more awful things. He's a complicated character, don't get me wrong. But I just have to wonder, like, as good as this episode was in getting a point across that, yeah, Askeladd and his men are indeed vile, reprehensible people, is it a necessary entry in the saga of Vinland, so to speak? I mean, you and I had this discussion previously where I said to you, could we not simply time skip from Thorfinn, growing older to we've got to rescue Knut and have all the intermediary stuff come out? Now, I'm going to say this, though. I have heard that you might be better interpreting Vinland Saga more as a modern take on the historical epic, where it wasn't necessarily about, a super focused character drama, but rather think of it like, the Henry V kind of thing, classic Shakespeare, where you do have individual characters, but it's like a broad depiction of the time, so to speak, just as written by a modern author, rather than worrying about necessarily as a character focusing. So I bring that up only to point out that my opinion of possibly redundant, even as good as it was, is just mine, and your mileage may vary. Don't take my word to necessarily be, objective or, truthful or certain even, but it's just how I felt.
Excuse me. I guess, yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, like, in terms of the characters that we kind of care about, the main characters, so to speak. Not a whole hell of a lot was done to flesh them out. It just kind of, we're moving them from one place to another.
If I may elaborate with a quick distinction.
Okay.
So I mentioned that Thorfinn and Knut have no voice lines of dialogue in the episode whatsoever. Now, let me pose two hypotheticals to you. Which of these sounds more likely? That was entirely accidental on the part of Makoto Yukimura and, the people who adapted this show because they didn't pay attention to them? Or rather, as I personally believe, that it was a very deliberate choice in this particular slice of the story to not have them speak at all and just present them as uncaring, indifferent individuals. To me seems like the more likely explanation. And that's why I think to myself, as much as in like the grander scheme of Vinland Saga, that I think to myself, well, okay, fair enough. This is still a very, very competently executed slice thereof.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just that.
But if you're not hungry, though, even if you get served a great steak, doesn't necessarily mean you want to eat it, though. And I've just committed the cardinal sin of criticism, which is fake food references.
Bringing the food into it, yeah.
So I'll trade in my anime criticism, which I stole from someone else anyway. So there we go.
So I, of all the things that you, or of all the pieces of the anime that are not, 100% focused on Thorfinn or Askeladd or Knut, that you feel like are skippable, I would say, like, this is the best one of those. Like, I don't think it's skippable. Like, I think it was incredibly well executed, and the show would be poorer for it not being there. Whereas I couldn't really say the same thing about other pieces of the show that felt a little bit wheel spinning. For the reasons you mentioned.
I should make another caveat, actually, now that you brought that up, which is that this is, again, a flaw in our own format of analysing this show week on week. Because, let me pitch an idea to you. Could you imagine a moment in which Knut later on, because we've had hints in the OP that he's going to become a more hardened, bitter, like he's been chewed up and spat out kind of person. He loses his, naivete and his softness and becomes cruel even. Like, I can imagine that. Mm-hmm. But can you imagine, a scene later on in this very same show where he will flash back to this moment and use as an example for him to make, to order Ragnar to order their men. Oh, I've seen this done elsewhere where the entire village got murdered and it was fine. Do it. Fucking kill him. So I must also stress that as much as I think I've heard this music before, can we have something different on rather than just being on repeat all the time? Doesn't mean that, it's not going to serve a purpose later on.
Yeah, and I think this, like, our buddy here in the chat, James Beckett, mentioned in his review of it how different the episode really felt than pretty much every other episode. And like that I think is a good reason to keep it. Like, because there are many episodes in kind of long serialized fiction that take detours, and those are, I think, not like on the same level as filler or skippable. Like they're a just because they're not kind of furthering the main stories doesn't mean they're an unnecessary part of the art, especially if they do something different or interesting. And I think, like, this episode, it just felt different enough, and just this little kind of self-contained singular arc that felt like, I don't know, it felt like we needed to experience this part of the world, this part of the world of Vinland. Like, I didn't get the same, that whole thing about you mentioned in episode 8, the other woman who Thorfinn tricked as a young boy, as a young scout. That was still kind of about Thorfinn, whereas this, as you said, was about the rest of the world looking in at our group of main characters, and it felt really refreshing because of that, which is a weird way to describe this episode. But yeah, like the point of view and everything felt really unique, and I really dug that about this.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on this, like, I'm very much of two minds on it, because I recognize the episode for its quality, but I'm just curious as to its overall place. And maybe on the latter point, I should hold on judging on that until the entire show is run through. Maybe that's for the better. But I think it just serves an example again how individual moments in fiction can often be executed incredibly well. It's not a case of simply being like this bad and therefore rest bad. Like, you can have something that's so fantastically done, but it doesn't serve a purpose.
Sure.
Now, again, not saying that's necessarily the case with here, but I just find it fascinating to think of that, we can have moments like that. And that was, again, my initial reaction. But I am of the opinion that this episode's particular musings on Christianity probably pull it out from that, because they themselves alone are very much worth talking about and considering. Be it if you're a person of faith or not.
Yeah, the content is like a whole nother, like, merit for the episode that we could argue for. But just speaking of these other more kind of technical pieces and looking at the episode as a whole and how different it feels, like, I think all that is in its favor, but also the content. And I think I'm like tend to be a little bit more forgiving about whether or not, like you said, individual moments or chapters or pieces of fiction sort of fit cleanly and cohesively into a whole. Like, I'm more okay with messiness in all of this and detours than I think you tend to be in general. But
that's fair.
Like, but the quality still has to be there, and I think the quality is there.
It definitely is. It's better than
this.
Stuff I've seen in other shows this year where, this episode is completely functionally irrelevant. And on top of that, it's also shit.
Also, I think this episode is better than many of the episodes that were about our big three characters.
That in of itself can be a compliment, but also a condemnation of the show, if you think about it.
It could be. It
depends on how you want to view it. And again, like, that's why I say your mileage is very much going to... Because, and I'm going to spoil ahead of time, I'm actually going to rate this episode twice when we get to the end. One for itself and just in its own vacuum, but also its purpose in the wider story.
Okay.
It's just one of those weird things for me where I couldn't help but think, I really like this, but I also kind of didn't care. which sounds cruel, but hey, there we go. Sounds like a couple of dates I've been on in my life, to be quite honest. But then,
Sad. Sad jokes.
wow. Oh dear.
Well, okay, so
before you have a next talking point on, I would very much like to take a bio break.
oh, okay. Let's do that.
I'm gonna ruin the stream again twice in one night by ducking away. First for a phone call, second for a bio break. Next thing you know, it'll just be Christian missionaries at the door saying, "Have you heard about Vinland Saga?" But I'll leave you all to stew on that just for a second. I'll be back momentarily.
we're back.
We're back.
We are back. Hopefully that was not too long for you folks, but okay. Talking points continue. I have a lot of mine like clustered together around a similar issue, but one of them that I think is separate from the rest is Knut. And funny, he doesn't really get a lot of screen time this episode, but I think
he appears all at once.
But I think it's still like that is still significant, and that one shot is significant. You know, you just got him. I mean, maybe he appears twice, right? Like, but the one time I'm thinking of is when Askeladd is talking out how he's going to murder everyone in the village, and how it's best for the prince, and all these people there's not enough food to keep them alive, etc., etc. And he looks over at Knut, and Knut looks down. What do you think that look? What do you think's going on in his head, and how does he feel right now?
I have a couple of thoughts on this. So the first thing that springs to mind is this, right? Knut is like heir apparent, basically, to the throne. And insofar as his royal power goes, he, in theory, should have authority over Askeladd, over Ragnar, over all the others that are there before them. And he doesn't say a damn word. So how do you want to interpret that, then? Do you want to interpret that as someone who knows he has power but has no will to exercise it? Who is too cowardly to do so? Do you want to interpret it as someone who, you know, realizes that even if he did say that, he wouldn't be listened to? You know, that all his power is worth naught? Like, there's a couple of different ways you could read this. And I think for me, the way that I see it is I reckon that Knut would have probably not said something to Askeladd, but he would have tried to get Ragnar to intervene somehow for all the good that would do. But it would have been an attempt. But I think that him looking down like this, him recognizing the inevitability of what's about to happen, because, like, you know, in the gigantic meshed up relationship that is, you know, Askeladd, Thorfinn, Knut, Ragnar, Bjorn, Aster, if you want to throw him as well. Like, the only one wearing the pants in this menage, whatever, is Askeladd. He's the one in charge. He's running the show.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, in theory, he has no power, really, but Knut does. But Knut chooses not to exercise it, or doesn't feel he can, or feels it would be ignored. And indeed, that contrasts with Askeladd saying before, "Oh, hey, look, my men. You see that guy over there? See him? That's him."
Oh no, you're breaking up. No. Robot Shadon. Yeah, let's see. Let me leave the call and restart the call, and we'll see if we can get a connection restored. Okay.
This is turning into such a spaghetti stream. It really is. And you started talking like the T800 then.
As did you. So I think, I guess I don't know what, the bars definitely dipped to red, and they're in yellow now. They were in green, but now we're in yellow, so beware.
I'm guessing that my hot wiring of the broadband filter is having consequences, quite possibly. Who could say? So anyway, you were saying, though, Doc, before you started talking like, you were HAL 9000 or whatever.
Well, you were talking, because I was asking you about Knut's state of mind, and you posited a ton of different readings that are all fair.
It really depends on what you want to read it as, and I think this, again, is going to be one of those cases where, like I said before, with the whole, what purpose does this episode serve, it's going to be something that he'll look back on, like possibly as a moment of weakness, like, I should have asserted myself. Even if ultimately Knut's like, stepping up and saying, Askeladd, don't fucking touch those people, and Askeladd ignores him, he still tried. It's better than doing nothing, than remaining apathetic or silent or scared.
Mm-hmm.
That still isn't, an assertive action in itself. So, I don't know. But I will again bring it back to the idea of how Anne sees it, which is that this is a man who, in theory, could intervene.
Mm-hmm.
He could stop this happening, and that also, funnily enough, applies to Thorfinn. How many times have I said before that he should have cut Askeladd 6 ways from, Sunday by this point? But neither of them do. They allow this to happen. Both the prince and the pauper, funnily enough.
Yeah. I wonder if he'll take, so clearly, like, he's afraid. He's afraid of going against Askeladd. He's afraid of voicing his own opinion at all. He's probably afraid of what's about to happen. Like you said, there's an inevitability about Askeladd's plans here. And I just wonder if he is, like, what lessons he's going to take away from this. And, like, how to put this? So if he will come away from this thinking that the certain life is certain lives are more valuable than others, which is sort of the rationale that is used by Askeladd, right? And when he says, "Hey, this is for the prince. This is what's best for him, and so we need to do this. All these other people are expendable when it comes to His Highness's safety and health, right?" And I just wonder if he'll take this on board, because that notion is very much at odds with Christianity and its tenets, which, like, historians and philosophers have noted, I think Peter Lawler was the person that I read who wrote this, but that like Christianity was like a gift from the aristocracy to the people, not intentionally, but it was indirectly or unbeknownst to them because of the democratization of the worth of life. Because in Christianity, all life is sacred. All human beings are made in the image of God, not just some, right? Not just the monarchy or not just the wealthy. And so kind of slowly over time, the faith sort of helped democratic movements all throughout kind of the Western world help justify those, whether it be the first Americans writing the Declaration of Independence and saying like, everyone has these rights no matter what, or people like Martin Luther King writing about natural law, and how like the rights and the worth of minorities, of black people is as much as others. So a lot of these kind of political movements are rooted in the faith, and rooted in Christianity and the democratization of the worth of life. And so I'm wondering if Knut will kind of swallow Askeladd's reasoning, or whether or not he has absorbed, Christian doctrine to the degree that he will say to himself, like, no, this is wrong. This is not, I'm important, but it doesn't, like, me living doesn't justify slaughtering a bunch of these innocent people. Yeah.
Indeed, Asgard might very well have done that because to point out something, which is that Christianity ultimately isn't a shield, because that's Knut's own, defense, like that's his armor, but it doesn't stop Asgard from committing the horrible things that he does. But there's a lot of layers to this, which I will get into shortly, because holy crap. But yeah, no, I think that Knut is going through what we would call a test of faith right now, because when you rely on a deity to protect you, to shield you, and then that ultimately bears no fruit, as it does with Anne in this case, ironically. What is your answer to that? What is your response? How far, how deep does your faith go? I mean, I'm not myself a religious person, but I have had, only this week, ironically, a lot of shit piled on me. And it does test one's patience, one's will, one's sense of self, one's, mental fortitude. And I can totally imagine how, as someone who does have a religious framework that, codifies their life and allows them to understand the world around them, that if they were similarly dumped on, be it myself or like in Anne's case or anything else, all the myriad ways in which the world can truly hurt someone, that would test them. And then that just tests how deep their conviction goes. But funnily enough, then you have to ask the question, should you allow your faith to go that deep where you would not continue you would never continue questioning it? Or rather, no, this is not a good framework for me. I need to have something else to rely on instead. Because after all, as we've said before, if we go back to Thors, who is mentioned in this episode, by the way, Thors had a very solid framework. He had a very, strong philosophy. I will not kill. Look where that got him. Look where that got his son. Maybe absolute dogmatism, absolute fervor and belief in any framework, religious or otherwise, as Vinland Saga posits, will serve you no good in the end. It doesn't mean you should, boomerang all the way over to the other side, but maybe you should find the middle ground.
It certainly does. You could make a case that that's what the show's trying to do, right? It's point out that belief systems as such are not really good or healthy. So whether or not you agree with that. Like that's, or whether or not you think that's what the show is doing, and we only have a partial understanding. We only see in part, Shadon. We see through a glass darkly at the moment.
Like this.
Exactly. Yes. One day we will see clearly after you've drunk all the vodka.
That'll be tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow when I start.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you have next on the agenda?
All right, let's tackle the big question here. Let's go right into the the real meat of this episode.
How dope is that ring? I mean, it is so dope.
It's super fly.
That's the real meat. We're gonna talk about the fashion, the ring. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just beautiful.
I mean, how does that Beyonce song look? She'd like you to put a ring on it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So, big question. I'm going to put this to a poll in a minute once I phrase it. Doc, what do you believe is more likely? That God punished Anne by allowing her family to be massacred for her crime because it parallels Askeladd's own crimes of pillaging, plundering, and stealing, because it really does?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you believe that he spared her by using the ring as a kind of divine providence or guidance to lead her away from danger?
What if there's a third option?
Oh, shit, son! Oh, dog, what are you doing?
What if...
Why are you saying you can flip a coin and have it land on its edge? You motherfucker! Go on.
Some trivalent logic. What if he's punishing her by allowing her to live?
Woofed.
Am I right?
Woofed.
What if the family ended up getting off easy compared to what's coming? Grisly to think about.
It is. And you know what, right? Like, I don't have a conclusive answer one way or the other myself. I think both, in fact, all three readings are perfectly valid. Which is a testament to the strength of the writing of this episode, that it can, allow you to think in those ways. I mean, Anne certainly has her own perspective, which is that she thinks that she may very well have been punished, but she's also elated that her family have ended up in heaven nonetheless. But
it's hard to know what she thinks.
Yeah, but I mean, she's also, even then, she's half starved, she's cold, she's, traumatized. She's clearly not thinking straight.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't take it necessarily as reliable, her perspective, but, well, whenever is a perspective reliable from anyone, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a real strength of this episode that it was willing to test that kind of assertion about religion without asserting it to necessarily be strictly bad. I mean, if you go back to Berserk, which we mentioned before, like, I don't think there's a single time that the religion in that show or that manga, as I understand it, is ever presented in a positive light. I mean, what was the name of the priest again? The one who had, like, a square jaw like his fucking cinder block.
Was it like Mosgood?
Morrissey.
Morrissey.
I mean, Morrissey.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Morrissey's got a square chin.
Yep.
So there you go. He really was the first of the gang to die. Oh, the jokes just keep on coming. I'm just on fire tonight.
God.
So the reason I bring this up is that I mentioned before, like, the parallel between her and Askeladd. Because let's put it bluntly, right? She stole that ring. I mean, Lord of the Rings jokes aside, she took that because she wanted it. And Askeladd, in turn, he says, like, looting and pillaging is a thing that we Danes do. So he himself has stolen many, many items throughout his career. I mean, come on, let's go back to the episode where he ended up literally rocking up on a boat covered in bling. We've seen that. That is something we have seen.
That was very funny.
That's true. Like, she has that parallel between him and her.
Is it really a parallel?
No. Well, I think so, but the only difference is in terms of magnitude.
Well,
taking something that doesn't belong to you.
But also, Shadon. Also, he killed people and took their shit. She was, as you said, a little girl who had never known any
Wasn't Askeladd also very young at some point in his life?
Well, of course.
I'm just saying that I'm saying you
but-
can see like steps going along here. I'm not obviously thinking that she's going to say it's a fucking Boudic or anything like that, but
I just think that her age and circumstances to me are so starkly different from his that I would not even
to see your mother like murdered before your eyes or taken away from you or abused, like, you know, because of a foreign invading force.
You talking about Askeladd?
Yeah, do you remember what happened with Lydia, where he's carrying her off the boat, like where she
Yeah.
was taken by Olaf? Like, there's more commonalities than you might think. But on top of that, let me also point something else out. So, great attention is paid in this episode, and I have to give credit to Wit Studio for finally bringing a decent A game here. Which, given I've just recently watched Babylon, which is also by them, like, I'm so glad that they're finally upping their game. Like, look at the hands. You know, you get to see like broken fingernails, you get to see like the calluses, the the rough skin.
Mm-hmm.
Anne is clearly someone who lives a dirt farmer's life, backbreaking labor every day that she lives.
She also has remorse, by the way, unlike Askeladd.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure Askeladd at some point had remorse, but well, like Metal Gear Solid once said, killing's one of those things that get easy as you do it. I'm
Right.
not saying when I say parallels, I'm talking very broad strokes, not in terms of like where they are in the stages of their lives. Like, but if you told me that Anne, as she is now, is basically like Askeladd at his very beginning of his career as a pirate, like the very, very start, I could see that. That's the thing I'm going for here.
Sure. And if we're treated to like a little boy Askeladd starving, stealing a loaf of bread or whatever to feed his family, I would similarly be like, it's okay.
But here's the thing as well, though. Like, the reason I bring up this thing here, like, Anne clearly has ideas of a life better than, the one she has.
Mm-hmm.
And where have we heard that before in the show, funnily enough? And I would argue that similarly applies to Askeladd, even though, like, his life is built on the suffering of others. Now, one could make the argument, of course, she stole a ring. Boo fucking hiss to the guy selling it, whatever.
Right.
That's
The
how
slippery
it
slope.
the slippery slope. But I do think there's parallels, not massive, like overly apparent parallels. But I think there's enough there to point out that, we can again see how cycles perpetuate here. That, and her family was murdered despite the fact that they were better people than her on her own theological like standards, because they didn't steal, whereas she herself did, insofar as she knows. But she's the one who's still alive. So then you make the argument, okay, is that punishment? Or is that, her being spared by God? Is God even involved in this? Because there's a big problem with moving in mysterious ways. And the big problem with that is that you don't know whether or not, people will look at what you're doing and not realize you are indeed moving in mysterious ways. They'll think it's something else.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So I found this really fascinating that it was willing to maintain that level of ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. It's always good when phenomena underdetermine a hypothesis, and you could plausibly insert numerous ones that fit.
Absolutely. So what's your feeling then, Doc? Do you reckon God's helping her, or do you reckon God's punishing her?
I mean, as someone who's admittedly a non-believer in mourning about being a non-believer, I just don't think he really factors into the equation. I think that's probably the author's point of view.
Well, I have something else to add to that then, which I mentioned before. And I think this also, again, speaks to maybe the fact that God, as presented in the show, actually flat out doesn't exist. Literally, he is more just the agnostic or atheist concept thereof, work of fiction. And do you want to know why I say that? Remember what the priest does? He tries to intervene. He is literally a messenger of God going into that village saying, the Vikings are going to get you.
Yeah.
They'll fucking killed a lot of you. He has no idea who Anne is. So obviously, if she had been in the dining hall with him, he would have, warned her similarly. But his message is stopped short. So the literal intervention of God does not save any of them except for Anne.
Right. You could argue God used a pretty blunt instrument there with Mr. Priest proper.
Well, he hadn't yet finished his tank at a base. Maybe that's
I know.
why he got a bit
Yeah,
delayed.
he couldn't go Super Saiyan soon enough to save everyone. But so this leads into a talking point that I have. One of, I think, a couple of different connected ones. And I think Anne's guilt is fascinating because I think there are, like, it's been my experience that you could have a whole group, a big group of religious people, and, like, not all of them are going to feel the same guilt or contrition over their wrongdoing, their quote unquote wrongdoing, their sins, right? Like, only some people seem like to really be like racked with that kind of oppressive guilt that she is. She clearly goes out there every day to look at this ring, to chastise herself, to talk about how, think about how bad she is, to say, no, this is it. I'm going to throw it away. Or, you know what? I'm going to return it. And then I'll be forgiven, only to just keep it because the beauty kind of overwhelms her. She loves having this wonderful thing on her finger. But she feels guilty about that feeling also. And I think, boy, why is it? Why is it that only some people feel guilty about this sort of thing, right? Like in the Catholic Church, there's something. Have you ever heard, Shadon, of scruples or scrupulosity?
Vaguely, but please do elaborate.
So basically, it's a sin, and it's feeling all this excessive guilt, despite the fact that you've gone to confession, that you have been forgiven. You're not
sign
like
me the fuck up, because that is one of my greatest personality flaws. Holy shit.
Yeah, I struggled with it mightily when I was when I was a good Catholic, and talked a lot to various priests about it. And I mean, I think I feel like other people, even in Anne's own village, would do something like that and then just not think anything of it. Or they'd be like, I've been forgiven, like I've asked for forgiveness and now it's over and I can put it behind me. Like there's other people that I've known in the faith.
I did my time in the booth. It's fine. God's cool with me, We even traded cell phone numbers and LinkedIn profiles. It's fine.
But not even as cynical as you're putting it. Like,
well, that's just me.
Yeah, but like people that were genuinely sorry, and then they through whatever means they deem necessary, like get forgiveness, and then that's it, and they move on, and they're not like as stressed about it. They're not wringing their hands and sort of worried about their immortal soul. Now, it's kind of a difference here is that Anne won't give the ring back. But you know what? She's already done the deed. The stealing has already happened, and yet she still is feeling guilty about this every day. How much do you want to bet, like, her brothers haven't done some shit, right? They've done some shit. They've transgressed God's commands. And, Jesus himself said, like, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit, and to love your neighbor as yourself. They probably haven't done that on a few days. He said that's even greater commandment than not stealing.
Never even mind speculating about it. What did we see in the episode where the younger brothers were snickering, like, during grace? They clearly didn't take it entirely seriously.
Yeah, which, I mean, they're kids, so whatever. But, like, from Anne's point of view...
Is that an excuse, though, in that religion?
Yes, for sure. Especially if your child has been baptized. But, like, yeah, there's a lot of theology about, like, being of age. You know what I mean? And kids are going to be kids all a lot of the time, and it's fine if you have a 5-year-old who doesn't really understand prayer. You know what I mean? Especially in the home, like it's just an educational moment. Those things, and the parents are meant to teach them why it's important. It's fine. But all this to say, like, Anne, the deeply spiritual girl who is like racked by guilt, believes herself like bound to go to hell, like, is so interesting. And I feel like she's the most spiritual child in the house, and yet she's the one who believes she's going to go to hell. She's the one who's praying herself. She's the one who has this active, I guess for lack of a better term, relationship with her God. But she thinks she's fucked.
Well, if I may, in Spain, just ask you another question. You said about going to hell. What if I said to you that Askeladd turned up at her doorstep precisely because God willed it to happen as punishment for her stealing the ring?
Well, I would say that that's a shitty God who would punish other people for...
But he moves in mysterious ways.
Well, he's also supposed to be just and loving.
But then again, as the episode presents, though, how can God truly be just? I mean, this is like one of the great philosophical guys, which is if he's omnipotent and omniscient, why does he not intervene? Mm-hmm. Where's the intervention?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the intervention that happens in this episode, as I said just minutes ago, was the priest coming in to say, this is about to, like, some real shit is about to go down here. You might want to, make like Iron Maiden and run for the hills.
And that doesn't even qualify as intervention, really. I mean, there was nothing... Like, he allowed them, they're in chance of being safe and escaping the encounter did not go up even a milli% based on what he did.
But you'd think that God would act through his agents on this earth, and clearly that did not happen, or rather it did, but it was ineffectual. So how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile the events of this episode versus Christianity? And again, I, as a non-religious person, like, I'm probably the least qualified person to offer this perspective here, but I still stand very strongly by, believe it or not, something I mentioned on the podcast before. I know it sounds like the most asinine and stupid thing ever, but it's the one abiding thing I remember from this film, and it's the Bruce Almighty perspective. And it's true. And
I think said this before.
I think there's a lot of truth to it, which is that, in that film, you had people like praying for wealth and they got there in the end. But, better to make your own miracles, to have your own definitive actions in your own agency, rather than relying on a force that may or may not exist to make that happen. And obviously, even that doesn't necessarily count as the whole free will versus determinism argument entirely, because everything could be dictated. We could get into arguments about that for all day and all night. Mm-hmm. And even then, that itself might be dictated. Who can say, like, do you see how many red pills one has to take to get through this? Holy shit! Like, I've not got enough in my little, like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday count here. So it depends on how you feel about it, and even like within the framework of believing God is real, like, you can then decide whether or not he's punishing Anna or not. Using Askeladd and his men as a force of retribution towards say, like, this is the path you live. This is why I brought the parallels, by the way, because guess where your path leads to? The point in which you plunder and pillage from someone so much that you destroy the lives of others entirely. Depends on how far you want to take it.
Right.
Depends on how you want to read it.
Yeah, and I mean, there is room for other kinds of, like the god of Vinland Saga could be... we have been talking about a theistic and active kind of conception of God, a God that's like actually cares about humanity and intervenes. But maybe the god of Vinland Saga is, just wound the universe up like a cheap pocket watch, and then it's kicking back and doing other shit while it all unwinds. And
you just like.
Maybe it or them or her is there.
That's some good creation, bro.
But they just don't give a shit. about individuals. I don't know. But there's like a lot of, there's, like you said, there's so many kind of frameworks that you could fit on top of these actions when it comes to like metaphysical beliefs or theistic, atheistic, deistic worldviews, and then like fit that on top of the actions and then like suss out the consequences. The theistic view has like a very hard time coping with this, and I think like this is the kind of next point that I want to bring up. I think it's pretty remarkable that Anne at the end of the episode still believes in God. It's kind of amazing because based on what we know, what we have heard, people that follow Jesus and pray every day are going to go to heaven. People that don't are going to go to hell. Now, this is eternal destination, but you would hope and think that it wouldn't also be like that if you were a follower of Jesus, you wouldn't be brutalized by the sword and, or raped and or like plundered. But maybe
unless you lived in ancient Rome, or even ancient Rome, but rather, at the time before, what was it, Diocletian or whatever, where they were feeding to lions.
Sure. And maybe
a pretty rough time then.
Yeah, maybe this is like me focusing too much on the material conditions and not just going like, well, they're going to heaven, so it's fine. But like, kind of fuck that way of thinking, honestly. But she sees these evil people. She says herself, they don't care two dams about God's punishments, and they've won the day. They have taken the shelter, the food, the possessions, and they've killed everyone who kept Jesus' ways. And yet, instead of going, you know what, God, fuck this, she's like talks to him, and like he's there and he made this happen. You know what I mean? It's like, it boggles my mind. And maybe this is just sort of her circumstances, her education. And the only thing she can do in this moment is like fit everything that she's just seen into this worldview that she's been handed down. She is not equipped right now to like break it or make a new one. But she's just like, I'm so elated that evil people exist.
When you say that, Doc, like there's been evidence like recorded of doomsday cults who put definitive dates on when the world would end, which, spoiler alert, in case you don't realize, that's in the past. And I'm still here, motherfuckers. So guess what these doomsday cults did? They just like, oh, whoops, I guess, they didn't have the clock set right. It's time zones or something like on
the cosmic
distance. That kind of thing. That's the thing that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes as no surprise to me that Anne, like, if, as you say, like, she just reinterprets it in the same framework and just moves the goalposts along, so to speak.
Yeah, but those people are grifters. Those people
are fucking grifters.
Shitty, like, we're just trying to, like, gain followers so we can have access to people's bank accounts and sleep with fuck all their wives and shit. But, like...
1 second.
But Anne,
if you've read this book, then yes.
Right. Yes. This is cults are shitty, but like Anne is a person, just a little girl who's not a grifter. There's nothing in it for her to like continue on with it, I guess, except for her sort of sense of self and her sanity. But like, she doesn't have the same like material reasons to like be like, oh hell, it's okay, we didn't do the math right, the end of the world is actually 2 years from now. But
is it unreasonable to think that kind of a framework can give one to the license and the ability to reinterpret cataclysmic conditions like the death of one's entire family as part of a grander plan?
Totally.
I'd argue that's totally dogmatic, as she's got there. And indeed, maybe that's the argument that Vinland Saga is making here, which is that this framework, as it is for Knut, as it is for, all the other Christians thus far, cannot save them. It cannot, help them in the face of definitive action. But then again, the definitive action we've seen thus far from a lot of the characters, including Askeladd, has been overwhelmingly self-serving and incredibly destructive. So
yeah, I mean, these sort of events are the big reason why people, I think most people who were kind of like wanting to believe, or maybe did believe for a time, or were considering it, like, sorry, I'm getting a million texts. I hope you don't hear all the buzzing.
Hey, I literally went off to take a phone call before it. We're all in the same boat here, mate.
But
the same Viking boat.
Yes. The problem of evil is the big one, right? The problem of gratuitous suffering in the world. How do you reconcile the existence of these things that happened in this episode that are very much happening, have happened, will continue to happen, and worse in the world, with the existence of loving God who is he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving. Like, how do you square them? And most people, there's no real good intellectual answers, coming from a person who's looked there are some answers that in the abstract, if you were looking at this like a math problem, could be satisfactory to you. But I don't think that there's any good answers for like people's emotional problems with it.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that.
So this is why like I find it remarkable. But I am a different person in a different position than Anne. And I mean, to be fair, when really horrible shit that has happened to me, that ultimately did lead me to a place of unbelief, right kind of as it was happening and in the wake of it. Like, I still was a person of faith, so I guess I'm not really even judging her, but I guess I can't sit here and say, oh, this is weird, because I did the same thing.
If I may relate it back to my own experiences, like, people listening at home, like, you probably have a piecemeal idea of how torturous the last couple of days of my life have been. And I think that everyone has their own kind of faith of wanting to keep on going, living, and like find something in the future. And no doubt for me personally, that has been tested. But as with Anne here, like, she sees that, her family has been like, culled before her eyes, like they were nothing more than cattle. And yet she still keeps on going. And that's why it's called ultimately the Light of Dawn, this episode, because it's, as you say, dark as before, there's a future out there. So I can relate to that, absolutely. Even if ultimately there's no, like, objectively a thing like that out in the distance I can point to, which is waiting for me personally, doesn't mean it won't be there. Like, it's like looking for a telescope. Like, you might not see something in the distance that you can, like, say, oh, land ho, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean if you don't keep going that you won't find it.
She's clearly had some kind of epiphany. But, like, what is it? Because she's still... I guess she's still... I mean, maybe it's going to be a really kind of complex deal where she continues to believe in some kind of God, but also lives her life in she's like, okay, these people get to do evil and get away with it. That's what I'm going to do now, while still believing. You know what I mean?
But the funny thing is, Vinland gets to have its cake and eat it. Then, if that's true, that it plays into the cyclic nature that I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't play true, then it also, alludes to Thorfinn's own eventual fate of breaking out of it. Mm-hmm. Amazing how when you stack the deck like as a story writer, how you can go with that stuff. Like,
Right.
I must stress, folks, by the way, all the things that me and Doc have been discussing in this long-winded talk about faith, religion, all that, like, I think I should hope it's apparent, like, by how in deep we've gone into this, like, how meaningful this episode is. Even someone to me, like, who is not religious, who thinks that God literally should be treated as a fictional character like Dumbledore or John McClane, like, even I can derive a lot of meaning from this. And it's a lot of meaning that, you can read however you want to. Like, like I said before, she's being punished, or, she's being saved. There's ambiguity here, but it's genuinely welcome ambiguity that it challenges you as an audience member to consider what you're presented with. How many shows can you and I name, Doc, that like we've seen in our lifetimes that can truly do that? Not many, I would argue.
Not a ton.
There are a few out there, but like it asks you to consider the implications of the events you see.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really appreciate this episode for doing that. Even if, to go back to my original point, I question its overall place, I cannot deny how magnificently it was executed in terms of its writing and its script and its overall meaning.
Yeah, and just the tone isn't like judgy. Like it's not some.
Can I also add one other thing? It's just as a talking point here, very briefly.
Yeah.
So, okay, which studio CG has generally speaking been pretty bad throughout this show? Let's not kid ourselves here. But let's talk about the way the execution scene is framed, which is we don't really see the actual like full-blooded like gory murder. We only see it like as in axe raised, boom, axe raised, boom. You replace that with like a sickle or a scythe, and they might as well be reaping corn, for all it matters.
Grimly.
And I really appreciate the framing of this because it shows it for what it is, just a blunt, dull exercise in culling of life. There's no emotion behind it. We don't get to see the faces of those dying. We only see the after effects of like, mothers huddling sons like really close, or like, families huddled together as Snow White, comes over them, like showing like sort of like a slideshow. It's really, really effectively handled, this particular scene. And I appreciate how it's depicted. CG's notwithstanding, because honestly, like, being murdered by a CG axe, what a fucking way to go out. That's pretty bad, isn't it?
I've been digitally cut.
Oh, no.
But it did punch really hard. It's so often, like we talked about a million scenes that we feel like hit really hard because you don't really see a lot of the details. And
I find the more controlled and like there's a phrase I'm going to use. The more controlled ambiguity you use, I find often makes something a lot more punchy, because the human brain often works on the worst possible outcome. And speaking as someone who like has deeply profound anxiety, like I can watch stuff like, I'll go back to a show I watched recently, Warui Penguin Drum. Like, and there's an incredible episode featuring a sculptor, and and there's a scene in that where he is saying, "I'm going to make you, my daughter, look beautiful." He's got his hammer, he's got his chisel, bang, bang, bang. But you know what? I'm showing you more than the episode did by even doing this motion, because all you see is the hammer raised down and you hear the bang noise. You don't see that happen. And I almost threw up when I saw that for the first time. It made me physically sick. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to review Warui Penguin Drum here as much as I otherwise should be, because that show is fucking incredible. Yeah. But I mean to illustrate through that the point that sometimes ambiguity and, like, choosing not to show something can be 10 times, if not more powerful than exhaustive detail on the topic thereof.
Mm-hmm.
Not showing Anne's family being brutally executed frame by frame, where we see them, like, bleeding out in slow motion, where we only see the axe raise up, not the actual effect thereafter. It makes it much more cold and clinical. And our brains fill in the rest.
Yeah.
And it really helps it hit home.
And we see it from like a real point of view. There's not like a omniscient camera, like, oh, how did this camera get right in on the action? It's like we see it from like Anne's perspective. And and there's just the fact that it is an exercise and so kind of detached from humanity.
I honestly got the impression that Askeladd treated this in the same way he would treat filing his tax returns.
Yeah, it's so brutal.
It's fill out a form.
Cold, man. And so Anne sees it, and she is still just like, God, like, you did it, or you got it. I mean, it's just wow. You know, I mean, she must have been raised on some Old Testament shit. You know what I mean?
The classic. Like, I love me a classic, I must say.
Just go brutalize everyone and burn all the children. Amen.
Indeed.
Jesus. Do you have any more points of the talk?
I have one more. Which
As do I.
Okay. I want to talk about Thor's entering the Matrix.
What? Okay.
Did you not see the scene where it was just him doing that roundhouse kick?
Yes.
Headlocking another, but it's got in the spinny camera. Are you telling me that's not some Wachowski shit? Come on, man.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
I just wanted to.
I'm always right. Come on, man. So, why am I bringing this up? Because it relates to the priest, and the priest learns of Thor's after the facts from people who killed him, but that still left an impression on them, like of how a true warrior doesn't need to use a sword. And I thought this was really fascinating, just to show that even in death, even in his failure, because if you want to be very objective about it, like, well, he didn't live. You know, he died in the battle, so obviously he didn't survive. But his son has also been cast into the fire that is, this whole existence he's lived in. So I think that Thor's having failed is pretty objective as far as the show presents it. But that doesn't mean that his actions in of themselves have not lived on after the facts. Mm-hmm. Even amongst the people who killed him, they still have an admiration for him. And it's kind of grown into its own legend. I mean, why do we see it presented like in that Matrix-like fashion? I'm not obviously thinking it's just a reference to that. I don't even think it was that deliberately. But rather, it shows how it's been mythologized amongst the people of amongst Askeladd's men in its own way. And I thought that was really, really neat that even after the facts, after, that failure, through admirable intent and hubris, no doubt, that still Thor's still has a profound impact on the lives of others beyond his son. I only mention that briefly because I think that it's still really, really interesting to note.
It is.
And as for what the priest's impression of that was, which is say, that he realized a true warrior doesn't need a sword, Thorfinn, he's been told that many times in his life, and he hasn't quite digested that yet because he's still embittered by wanting to, murder the fuck out of Askeladd. Mm-hmm. But other people are still receptive to that message. And I think it's a good, reminder, as I said before, about how episode, is us seeing Askeladd, Knut, and Thorfinn through the eyes of Anne. I think in turn it reminds us how we can see people like Thor's through the eyes of someone who's not Thorfinn, where he was that close. Sometimes a bit of distance, or even a lot of distance, can offer a different perspective on someone. Mm-hmm. So in some way, this feels like a pace setter, this episode. It's just all right, let's dial things back a little bit. Let's reorient ourselves towards the characters and the events of this show just before we go into the final quarter.
Yeah, which you're too close to Askeladd.
Yeah, he's too close to Askeladd. You're too close to Thorfinn, or rather not close enough. So I appreciate it for that.
Yeah, Andy in chat was saying that the episode, he felt it was at a good point in the episode ordering, because he'd been feeling pretty he's he's okay. He's just a prince who's been hard done by. He's gonna save the Welsh.
He's seen some shit, basically. We can understand that. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Okay, so my final point.
Before you get started, I'm going to one last bio break. I'll be back in just.
Oh, okay. Well, look, since we're still here, instead of going to break, I'll be here, and I'll just be on camera and on mic. And if you'd like to ask any questions in the chat, thank you, everyone, by the way, who's come to the chat on twitch.tv/Warui Deshou. Thanks for contributing. We had some really good comments and good questions. I believe, let's see, Andy said earlier, so I like how the two youngest of the three brothers were all, yeah, sure, God is here, while the older one was a bit more stern with his religious explanation, yes, and Anne's family. Like, that seems like a really, that was like a realistic dynamic. Like, that made everything hit home for me, that, like, the tiny little boys are just kind of, like, fucking around, whatever, who cares, we don't really get it, but as the middle child had gotten a little bit older, he'd taken more of it in, maybe, like, accepted for himself being a person of faith, and and so he was a little bit more like, yes, this is a real thing, and you two little brothers need to shut up while we're praying. That was like that made sense. What did we think of the opening conversation with the priest? So I did talk about this at the beginning. Shadon was away, so maybe he should say what he thought of it.
Well, I mean, we had the opening scenes seeing like people being murdered. So I think that for him, his faith is kind of in flux, that as time goes by, he's trying to find new meaning in it. And indeed, that's why he seems very receptive to the idea of Thor's, own legacy of a warrior does not need a true warrior doesn't need a sword.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his faith remains absolute, even if it is found at the bottom of a barrel of booze, let's be honest for ourselves. But, like, faith in itself can be a little bit fluid in some ways. Like, many people define God or a deity in their own way. And so, as, he has been tested, he's found new frameworks, within frameworks, so to speak, of how to handle that, of how to cope with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, is why he finds such, meaning in Thor's, like, legacy. So I think it sets the stage really well for seeing how he's repeat of, events that have gone on. But also, like, that he's open to new ideas and new possibilities as well. Like, you don't need to kill people.
So I the way that I thought the conversation was interesting, but like the sort of comedy with the two brothers in arms was a little it was fun, but it was so out of step with the rest of the episode.
Do you reckon that was the first recorded like historic instance of the JoJo's pose?
Probably, yes. The forearm smash to each other. The Smash Brothers like hit. No, or is it Bash Bros? I don't know. Anyway. So I think the priest is still a man of faith, but he's like looking for like love. I think he's looking for like either the love of God or sort of example of the love of God that he can.
How about if I may counter that? Well, that a love of humanity.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, I guess in a way, like he's looking for sort of an instance of love from one being to another that is like what he feels the love of God is like. And I think he, sees something of that in Thor's, something of Christ's teachings, and I think that's, and you sort of, in a roundabout, not a roundabout way, but in a way that doesn't make sense to the two brothers, you get a little bit clearer of a picture of some of the things that go into his idea of love, because they say, we would watch each other's back on the battlefield. We would die for each other out there, and we totally trust each other. And he says, well, would you trust me to watch you? Would you die for me? And they're like, no, because I would never, you're not an experienced soldier. you would let me get killed. I would never die for you because we haven't spent all the time on the battlefield together. There's not all those, like, there's not that foundation of time spent together and everything like that. And God damn it. There's not all that foundation that is present and underneath the brothers in arms, but that's precisely what makes their love, their relationship, not like what he's looking for. He's looking for something that transcends this kind of like tit for tat human reason. This whole like, well, I'll protect him because he'll protect me, or I trust him because he's a great warrior. Like, there's more to there's more of an absolute trust. There's more of an element of like almost irrationality about the love.
To go back to the idea of, you know, the priest finding real meaning in Thor's words. Like, Thor's clearly fought so much for his fellow man that he would not kill them if he could also do so. Like, I mean, go back to episode 2. There are no enemies. You have no enemies. All enemies are artificially defined by outside forces.
Yeah.
That, to me, I think that even without having heard, because obviously he wasn't there at the time, the priest understands the idea behind that. That, you know, our conflicts are artificially defined. That the lines are drawn, you know, by mortal men rather than, like, you know, big I don't know how to fucking describe, but you get my point. Unless so
Andy puts it a really great way, I think, is that like Thor's shows that he even cares about his enemies, not just the people he's fought with for so long, and that there's something like transcendent about that goes beyond the sort of love that they speak of. And Thor's did die for our sins. That's right, Facebook. You're correct in that.
Uh-oh, Facebook's around. That's a problem.
Facebook, to be precise.
Because selling us false political ads next. Oh, shit. Topical humor.
Hey! When's Cambridge Analytica going to come in the chat? That's what I want to know.
Fucking never, I hope.
I know. Okay, are you ready to hear my last talking point? This is the final one for me. Okay. So, the ring.
My precious.
That's right. You are precious.
Thank you. I'm glad you agree.
Listen, it's what I've said for years, and I'll brook no argument. So this ring of Anne's, it is her sin that she has stolen it, that she will not give it back, that she won't throw it away, all that other stuff. She's her attachment to it and her stealing it in the first place. And yet, of course, irony of ironies, that is the thing that gets her out of harm's way when the awful soldiers come to kill everyone, and she's the lone survivor of the village. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you could look at this, right? And I think you touched on some of these earlier, right? Like, you know, because of this sin, like, is she being saved or spared? Is she, to be given a second chance to get things right in life before she dies, or is she being punished by losing her family, and on and on? My own personal reading of the whole she didn't get killed because of the ring is, I think the way I'm looking at it is, I think it's the author saying, like, that religion, I think it's the author's sort of agnostic or atheistic point of view. and that religion ain't really something that's true.
Well, to follow up what you said there, like look at the events of the episodes we've seen thus far. Go back as far as seeing when Thorfinn met that lady who believed it, like for a second that she was like, he was rather like the reincarnation of a dead son, like she was Christian, and her Christian faith brought her the destruction of a village. Oops, whoopsie, bit of a bad moment. Then let's take Knut. What has Knut's faith brought him? Wandering around in the middle of fucking nowhere in the Great Britain, caught between Wales and England, used as a political pawn. It's not done it any fucking favors. It hasn't got him neither wine nor unleavened bread. What a shitter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I go to Sunday school myself for the booze and biscuits. So hey,
that's the reason to go, right?
It's the reason to go. And then, of course, in this very episode, we see that Anne's faith, on a much greater level of ambiguity than we presented before, but nonetheless, you can think to yourself, well, how do I read this? Punish or, save? It's up to you. But it's not clear cut. There's no clearly delineated positivity towards Christianity in this show's run thus far.
Yeah. And I think sort of the way that I parse all this is that if she was a good Christian girl who stuck to her commandments and was totally like all in, like I'm good, it's the best, she would have still been at the table and not left, and she would have been killed along with everybody else. But her sin, her bad thing that she did, got her out of there, got her out of harm's way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is, for me, this is the reading I take, so it's a little bit less ambiguous. Now, as I say that, as I'm sitting here saying that, I guess you could argue that it's her being a spiritual person and her sense of guilt that actually kind of drives her away from the house and everything, and that if she wasn't such a spiritual person to begin with, she could have died. So I guess the ambiguity does remain, but I don't know. I think for me, it's pretty for me at least, it is clear, despite me believing that there are other valid ways you could look at it. What's clear about it to me is that like the very dogmatic believer types all got stabbed, and a person who had a moment of weakness, who had sinned, she has belief, but she's not how do I say, she feels herself like she's not like sort of holier than thou and like this great and good sort of person, like that her sin took her away.
If I may offer another thought, is that say this right. So, speaking as an atheist here, speaking from a non-religious perspective, you could argue the episode is pointing out that those who take definitive action, for good or bad, are those who are ultimately rewarded for it. Because Anne lives, but then, you've got Thorfinn and Knut, who in their own ways could have acted many times to stop the awful things that are happening before them, but didn't do so. Mm-hmm. And again, that ties back to the Bruce Almighty joke, but also the sincere point I made before, which is that rather than relying on a god to solve things out for you, like maybe you should be more, affirmative in your own action. There's so much to unpack for this shit. Oh my god. And this is the thing, right? I must stress about this episode. One of the things I love about it so much is that there's no right or wrong answer from this. Every single person who walks away from watching this particular episode of this show, provided you, of course, have the previous context to back it up, like, you'll have your own feelings towards it. You'll apply your own framework, your own philosophy, your own viewpoint to it. And that's a good thing when a work of fiction like this can have that level of flexibility that it can challenge you to say, how do I react to this? And, oh, my reaction isn't necessarily wrong, but I'm glad it's challenged me to think about it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So Dana in chat says that she doesn't believe the author is making a comment on Christianity as much as how people who are decent and good are crushed by the brutality of those times. And I will respectfully disagree here, because I think the show has gone out of its way to say that those people who are Christians, like, their faith is a blunt instrument. I've used that phrase already here. It's like, it's not efficacious in terms of protecting you or anything like that. But you know what is? Getting a pair of twin daggers and cutting people's throats open. That's how you survive.
But then again, to argue in favor of that, like, would you agree that Thorfinn's life as presented right now is a good?
No.
I would argue no.
No. But he's alive. And he has a chance to.
But he's not exactly living, though. He's surviving. That's the distinction I made before.
Right, but he still has a chance to. As long as you're alive, there's another day. There's another chance to make things better for yourself. To make different choices.
But at the same time, the choice of that happening in a lot of these cases in the show, in fact, all of them, has been made by someone else. It's not a case of, oh, I choose to quit, but rather, someone fucking murdered me. I didn't get to make that choice.
Are you talking about all
the people you said before, like, who couldn't, like, they're still alive or not, like, that choice was not their own. It got taken from them. They were fucking murdered.
Who are you talking about specifically?
The villagers, all the people have been killed throughout the show's run.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, to me, like, as simple as, like, I choose to live the life of an assassin or whatever, and I'm living. But rather, like, that the choice has been made for all, whether or not they live or not. Like, it's not a question of contest of philosophy where, like, people act unto themselves, but rather they're acting unto others.
Yeah.
If you follow what I mean.
No, yeah, I do. And I think it's, like, I mean, the reason Christianity is being, quote-unquote, singled out, I guess, is, like, it's just the historically accurate. You know what I mean? That's what was happening during those times. So it's not necessarily, like, being unreasonably picked on.
To fire back again, and here's me, back in Christianity's corner as a guy who, like, God is, a fictional character. There is no non-Christian character that we've encountered thus far, with the possible exception of Thor's family and Thor's himself, and, well, look how that turned out for them. Or Thorkel, I suppose, but even then, you could argue...
They're living, though. They are living.
They are living. But, like, they all, like, are deeply mired in warfare and conflicts and bloodshed.
Yeah.
And I think, and bear in mind, this was not an old epic, which we think stuff like, oh, it's a product of the times. This was written in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see and appraise it for what it is, which is to say that, oh, look, this is not a good way to live. This is not a good way to be.
Yeah.
They might be winning, but ironically, they are also losing, as we see it.
I guess. I mean, it's hard to say that they have.
I mean, I'm not going out there riding on a boat that's being carried by, like, 24 people, like, over the plains of England. As much as I'd like to do that, I think that'd be fucking awesome. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, would you rather be one of the Bash brothers, or would you rather be one of the villagers? I mean, I think we would all choose to be, I think, well, I shouldn't say all of us, because then I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Having been part, no, I'm going to say I'm one of the other villagers. I believe that party to what they have been involved in, even by association. I mean, this is what, going back to what we discussed before, way back in another episode, where we're like, let's remind ourselves, Asgard is responsible for the rape, pillage, and plunder of many villages. He has murdered, demeaned, dehumanized, and God knows what else with how many people.
Yeah.
So And then maybe that's a weakness of the show itself, where it's not quite depicted as so brutally. One can, where we get too familiar. But again, this episode is meant to reorient us. Oh my god, crossing over. Ah!
So, like, I should also specify here. I don't necessarily think the show or the author is like Christianity is really shitty, but other religions are fine. Like, I think it's less specific about Christianity and more about religious faith kind of not really being a thing that can keep you safe in and of itself when it comes to like man's inhumanity, or I should this is an very old phrase, so I should say humans' inhumanity to other humans. It's just this really brutal and hard fact, especially during these times. And no matter if you're a faithful person or not.
Modern times, this is the question I've asked before, where that's why Vinland Saga might run a bit, weak for people, which is that it's an historical thing rather than a future thing. So it's not a place we could be where we could learn to be better, but rather it's a place we've been and we ain't any better now. Which I'm sure we'll revisit as we get towards the end of the show. But anyway.
Yeah.
That's why I mentioned.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I guess like you, I really like this episode for its the fact that it allows you to feel however you want about these things. It's not like saying, I mean, clearly it's showing Askeladd and those and his people. They're just heinously bad and evil, but like in terms of religious faith and that kind of thing, like it's not really being super judgy. It's very much however you could see it all these kind of different ways, and that's like a huge, I think, point in its favor. And I kind of gravitated to one reading of it, but like there are other. I could see someone being like, oh, God is totally here in the universe of Vinland Saga, and he, like, this is a test, and the villagers have all gone to heaven, so they're fine. They had some suffering in this life, but who doesn't? They're now in heaven. They're good. Anne's now been given another chance to figure out herself and atone for her sins and stuff like that. Not, in terms of my own life, that's, I'm not into that reading at all. So,
it's sweet show though, mate. It's sweet show. I mean, like I say, I have no faith, not in a religious construct, so to speak, but as someone who has been tested a lot throughout his life, in many arenas, in many forms, like to see, like, Anne fall at the end, but then to rise up again, despite everything that's happened to her. Like, I can relate to that. I can absolutely 100% get behind that in all of it.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, again, what we said before about even if you are lying on one side or the other of, like, punishing versus saving, I think that people can probably read, or rather gain or glean a lot from this episode and relate to it a lot, just in how that they've suffered themselves. Where I've been tested, but I'm still here. I'm going to keep on going despite all the adversity that lies before me.
Yeah, and that's something you don't need. Like, faith doesn't have to be part of that story of self-reliance, of resolve, of getting up off the floor again and again and again. Human beings that are faithful and human beings that are not all kind of have the capacity to do that, and it's a pretty remarkable thing in and of itself. And and I think seeing that is pretty powerful.
Indeed. Anyway, I'm tucking out for talking points. Do you have any more to add?
Nope. That's it.
All right.
That's it for me.
Well, let's wrap up with the polls then. So we've not had many votes yet on these, so do check them out at Warui Deshou on Twitter. I'll go for the first one, which is episode 14, poll 1. Is Shads just plain cursed? Or drunk, I suppose, at this point. And 17% said all work and no play, and 83% said make Shadon a dull boy.
Very good.
How can I not do that?
Very good.
Episode 14, poll 2. Which Mancunian team would Askeladd support? This is a clean sweep thus far, and 100% said City.
He is a front runner. So
next question. Episode 14, poll 3. Why do you think Knut chose not to speak up at the slaughter of the Mercian villagers? 33% say he was too afraid, and 67% say it'd make no difference. So in other words, he was cognizant of the fact that it wouldn't matter even if he spoke up, and that's why he didn't bother. Mm-hmm. Interesting question. So next one, episode 14, poll 4. What is God doing to Anne in this episode? 0% punishing her, 0% saving her, 100% Nietzsche was right.
Very good.
Very good. So do feel free to check out those polls if you've not already voted. Tweet them. Friends, very interested to hear your thoughts on those. But that's how it stands at the moment. We'll, of course, checking those next week.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So now it's time to rate the episode. And I am going to say that I give it 4.5 bowls of oniony porridge out of 5 for all the reasons that we've mentioned. I feel like I don't have to belabor the points by enumerating them again.
All right. Well, I mentioned before that I had 2 ratings for this because I'm that kind of fucking, annoying, wrench in the works kind of person. So, here's the thing, right? And no doubt I will eat these words. In fact, these will be on YouTube for me to eat them later. I will literally print out frame by frame and just... This episode for me was brilliant in pretty much every respect. Even in animation standards, which studio brought it up from what the standard I've seen previously, where I felt it was a bit sloppy in certain respects. Like the detail on Anne's hands, for example, or the snow, the snowdrifts blowing over the villagers after they've been slaughtered, to give cuts between seeing the scenes this like it was showing a slideshow, and it made it all the more horrific. I thought that was really good. And then, of course, there's the material that we've talked about at length here. I mean, this has gone for 2+ hours now, notwithstanding breaks and all that. I hope that speaks volumes to how much I drew out of this episode. So, mark your fucking calendars. Mark this day in history. I'm going to go one better than Doc. I'm going to give this episode, as one of my 2 ratings at the very least, a 4.75 beyond used as a battering ram out of 5. Because it really challenges you as a viewer to bring your own reading to it. But it also doesn't then refute that reading immediately. There's a lot of open room to interpret on this episode how you feel about it. And I think that's really, really strong. I think there's a lot of great stuff to be mined from this. Anne as a character, invokes, the audience perspective because she has never seen these people before. And she then brings us back to her perspective, reminding us what it's like to see these people the first time. And I think that's really, really powerful. However, because I'm such a prick, because I'm such a bastard, and because I like to be contrarian, the way I think Vinland Saga has been set up thus far, at least up until Thor's death, it was all about Thorfinn. Let's not kid ourselves here. It was about him and Thor's. And Thor's dies, so obviously the book, gets past him. The dramatic way gets past the Thorfinn. And I don't think Vinland Saga has really understood its own setup necessarily in leading up to that point. Now, you could argue that's intentional, and I'm not going to disagree with you. But for me, speaking from my own perspective and my own limited lizard brain viewpoint on this, and I know that you're rubbing that Agrexco plushie, stress ball there, because you know I'm going to chat some shit right now. So I'm sorry. But, for what to me felt like it was originally going to start off as a very character-focused drama, is moving to something more broad. Being broad in itself is not a problem, but I feel like it should have been broad from the beginning. And so that's why my complaints about these later episodes have been an issue. So I'm ultimately going to also offer the alternative rating. I'm going to give this, similarly, 3 out of 5 Bjorn's used as a battering ram. It's not as low as I could have taken it if I wanted to, because I still think it's effective, don't get me wrong, but I really want to start moving the plot along with Thorfinn and Knut and Askeladd. There are three main characters. I want things to start getting going. Like, we are at the Final Fantasy, 13, 20 hours mark here. Yeah, I'm making that reference. I'm making that fucking... You come at me, motherfuckers. I am making that joke. We are at that point now. And if you want to say to me, oh, he gets good at this particular point, I'm not going to deny that... I'm not going to say that you're wrong. But I'm also going to say, well, why couldn't it have been good to this point? Why did it take us this long to get to here? Why can it not been good throughout? I feel that's a fair point to ask.
Is this the point where we stop running forward down the hall? Are we at that point yet? In the game?
We've been doing that for the past 14 episodes. Give me some credit, man. So that's why I bring that up, because, and hey, I will look back on this episode of yourself. God, you really did inhale vodka like it was fucking oxygen, didn't you, you useless bastard? All right, jokes aside. I will look back at this episode and think to myself, okay, maybe I was wrong. Or maybe I was right. Because that's the flaw of doing this week on week. But as it stands right now, because it is being presented as have to ultimately treat it as such, and my reaction to this is thus, like, well, where's the narrative drive to this? Where's the push towards it? Like, I mean, we obviously covered Sarah's and Mai and Promised Neverland, and we were waiting week on week to see what happened next.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really quite feel that with Vinland Saga right now, because of the fact that it's moved away from Thorfinn and Knut. And I understand why it was done. I'm not saying that it's the case of, they did it because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They just thought, oh, I'm going to crowbar in this character for no reason. No, Anne and her family are in there for a very specific and very explicit reason. And I appreciate their inclusion based on the intent and the execution thereof.
Mm-hmm.
But I again must say, we started with Thorfinn. It doesn't feel like we're ending with him at this particular point, which feels very disconnected.
There are 10 weeks left to go. Maybe we'll bring it back.
Maybe I'll be at Christmas, I'll have a last time set and angry like I was with Banana Fish. Say, who can say?
Well, so yeah, I think you've touched on an uncomfortable reality that, despite me thinking this episode in particular was quite good, and some of the last ones, like, handful of the last few have been good, it's like, am I excited about next week? Not particularly. I mean, not that I'm not unexcited, I'm not dreading it, but I don't feel anticipation for what's coming next. Because I don't really know.
Doc, if I may offer you a thought.
You may.
So here's my wallet.
Okay.
Here's a £10 note.
Okay.
What do you reckon that Anne will not turn up again in this series?
Oh, so I was wondering if she was going to become like the priest's little acolyte.
Hildegard. No, Hildegard. Do you remember her?
I wanted her to be like a thing so bad. Yeah. Yeah.
£10. Are you in for that?
No, I can't do it because
I'm right.
I know I have a strong yes. I'm not willing to bet money on the opposite.
Which is, and I say, like, it speaks to the construction of the series as a whole, which is that I greatly enjoyed Anne's involvement in this particular episode, but, well, it told me something I already knew. Askeladd is shit. Great. To answer Dana's question there, well, this is the prince. So we've had hints in the OP that Knut is going to get hardened over time. He's going to, gravitate towards the dark side. Like, he's got this, like, resting bitch leaning face like this.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So I think that Askeladd's lesson here is that Christianity offers no shield to anyone. Like, it doesn't shield these people for all their prayer. And so he's teaching him, like, you should shed that, faith that you have as your armor, and instead become a man of action and become a man of, like, cold clinical pragmatism, where lives don't matter, but we do what we need to do. Because he was ultimately doing this. He was ultimately doing this in the end, after all, to feed his men. And you can make the argument of whether or not that was necessary or not. But that's how it was presented. So he's trying to teach the prince that, like, for all that he has this, he's, holding up the cross and all that, he's, doing the prayer, don't mean shit.
Yeah, so I didn't read as much into it. I think that's a really interesting take, though, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was correct. So I was just thinking about it in terms of this was his this is meant as a justification, obviously, for this really heinous action. And yeah, like he didn't really see any other course of action. So this is the best way to keep the prince alive and safe. I think that was all he meant. I think, because he was saying, look, if we turn back, my men are going to have to leave behind all their loot, and they won't like that. And if they
why is the loot then? Yeah.
He was ultimately that will be bad, because if they're unhappy, they could turn on him or whatever, because they're just mercenaries. And so he didn't really feel they had any other choice. And so this is the best thing to preserve the prince's life. Now, that sort of second implied lesson could very well be a thing, right? And I think that will be an interesting. And yeah, we definitely, I think Shadon especially talked about that, Dana, the episode serving as a turning point for his development, like him seeing this as like a watershed thing that he would look back on. Yeah, totally. It definitely feels like that is a big part of why this is here.
Undoubtedly, I'm sure this will be referred to again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, I think we've done it.
Well, I think we've done it.
Yeah.
I want to apologize, by the way, folks. This is breaks that we've had in this particular episode, both for the phone call and my bio breaks. I need to do both for a variety of reasons. And I just want to say that I appreciate your patience with that. I really do. So thank you for that.
Oh, of course. I was juggling every time you were off the air. I left us on stream, and I was juggling.
I would rely on no one else.
Well, if people want to get mad at you for all the breaks, how can they contact you on Twitter?
Well, tough shit.
Is it at well tough shit or just?
Well, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, you. No, I kid. If you ever want to talk to anything, I'm at Shadon1010 on Twitter. Just mess with anything you want, and I'll respond to in good faith. Because why not?
I am at the Subtle Doctor. Follow us on Twitter as a podcast / media producing entity at Warui Deshou, WARUIDESHOU, to talk with the group, including Vergalia there, to be notified when shows go live, when we get new content on the Patreon, or we're releasing new content to the public. That's where we will be notifying everyone, is via Twitter, or of course on Patreon, which you can subscribe to at patreon.com/Warui Deshou. We've got plenty of rewards, and since the season has changed over, there's been a little bit less activity from us, just a smidge, but Vinland here is getting us back in the swing of things. We're going to start recording tomorrow our Sherlock, our case file, lowercase n, superscript 0, 22 Sherlock.
I've got feelings about that show. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot to say.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So this show won a poll that we did on Patreon, and so this is going to be our second stream content. We've got other content as well. We've got Shadon working on Tokyo Godfathers.
I'm hoping to have that out this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Literally putting all my spare time aside to do that. So I hope to have that done.
And me working on various little projects that I have ideas for and requests that I would keep plugging away on, that I promise will be done when they're done. And yeah, we hope that the drip feed will feed you and drip upon you.
Keep you nourished.
Yes, thank you. And we've got a YouTube, we've got a SoundCloud, a Gmail, wateruideshow@gmail. If you want to contact us there, if your question doesn't fit into 240 characters. If you don't feel like subscribing on Patreon because you don't have the coin, then please do follow us on Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, share our stuff, etc., etc. It helps us out. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That will be tremendous. That helps the discoverability as much as sharing YouTube videos and the like. But thank you all so very much for coming out today. We sure do appreciate it. Thank you all for listening on demand elsewhere or watching VOD. We love you all and appreciate you.
And if I may just add, I want to thank you all for giving me a face to talk about this kind of stuff, because this is stuff that keeps me sane. It, allows me to de-stress, to laugh a little bit of steam, like as you obviously listened to earlier in the podcast run. But nonetheless, thank you all for being the audience to my bullshit, and I really, really do appreciate it.
We always appreciate it. You, Shadon. And we always appreciate our audience.
Thank you.
We love ya. And as we say at the end of every podcast we do, embrace each other, everyone, to the ends of the universe.
Good night.